Eleanor Whitfield slammed her writing crop down on her father's desk, so hard the inkwell jumped. "I will not marry him," she said. "Not in 21 days, not in 21 years. I would sooner marry a grave papa than a widower who buried his wife and calls it a bargain." The judge did not raise his head. He only signed his name to the contract that had already sold her. And Eleanor Whitfield learned at 22 years of age that in Virginia, a daughter's scream was worth less than a father's debt. Before we ride any further into this story, friend, please subscribe to the channel. Stay with me all the way to the end, and drop the name of the city where you're listening in the comments so I can see just how far this tale has traveled. The morning Eleanor Whitfield learned she had been sold, she had been in the saddle since before sunrise. She came in through the side kitchen door, still in her riding skirt, her boots leaving pale Virginia dust across her mother's clean floorboards, and the first thing Margaret Whitfield did was catch her wrist. "Eleanor, your father is waiting in the study." "He can keep waiting, Mama. I've been up since 4. "Now, Eleanor, please." Eleanor looked down at her mother's hand. It was not gripping hard. That was what frightened her. Margaret Whitfield was a woman whose hands always moved, always arranged. Something always smoothed a collar, always turned down a corner of a bedsheet. This hand was still. This hand was trying to hold her daughter in place one last moment before something happened that could not be unhappened. "Mama." "Don't argue with him today, child." "Why today?" "Don't argue with him, Eleanor. Whatever he says, don't argue." "Why today, Mama?" Margaret did not answer. Her mouth did the thing it did when she was about to weep, and had forbidden herself from weeping at the same time. "Go to him." Eleanor pushed the study door open without knocking the way she had done 100 times since she was 8 years old. Her father did not look up. He was writing at his desk, and he wrote the way he did everything with the slow, deliberate hand of a man who had already decided. "Sit, Eleanor." "I'll stand. I smell of horse." "Sit." She sat on the edge of the chair across from him, still in her riding clothes, still smelling of horse and summer dust and bruised grass. "Papa, Mama is in the hall trying not to cry. If you have something to say to me, say it, and let us be done." Judge Samuel Whitfield laid down his pen. "You are promised," he said, "in marriage." Eleanor did not move. "To whom?" "To Nathaniel Reed." She let out a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a word. "The widower." "Yes, the one the town calls the Beast of Virginia. That is servants' talk. I will not have that word spoken in my house. They say he has not offered a civil sentence to a living soul since the day his wife died in childbed. They say his own housekeeper crosses herself when she leaves his study. They say his land is vast and his heart is buried out at that little reed churchyard with his wife and the child she did not live long enough to hold. They say that Papa, I did not invent it on the ride home. You are 22, Eleanor. I know my age. Then you know what is coming for a woman of 22 in a house whose fields have not paid their own bills in 3 summers. Say what you signed, Papa. Eleanor, say what you signed. I signed a settlement of marriage. Nathaniel Reed has discharged the liens against this land. In exchange, he takes you as his wife. The papers are drawn. The witnesses are named. The wedding is set for the last Saturday of the month in this house at 3 o'clock before the Reverend Halloway. Eleanor stood so fast her chair scraped. You sold me. I saved this family. You sold me. I did. The judge said, what a man does when his choices are gone, daughter. I did what your grandfather did for me. I did what half the men in this county have done when the rain fails and the bank sends a second letter. I am not a field, Papa. No, Eleanor. You are better than a field a man can lose, a marriage he cannot. It landed in her chest like a kick. She stared at him. Look at me, she said. I am looking at you. Look at me and say it again, Papa. Look at me. You will marry Nathaniel Reed. And if I refuse? You will not refuse. And if I do? The judge was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower and steadier, and that was worse than a shout. "Then you will leave this house with no dowry, no letter of introduction, no claim on a single acre of this land, and no cousin within 3 counties willing to take you in, because I will write each of them before the sun is down tonight. You will have the clothes on your back, Eleanor, and you will have the road. You would do that. I would do it before I let this family be ruined by a headstrong girl who has confused a temper for a principle." Eleanor's eyes stung. She did not let the tears fall, not in front of him, not today. "And Mama, your mother knows. For how long? A week. A week. A little more. That is not your concern. A week, Papa, is exactly my concern." She came out of the study and walked straight past her mother without stopping. "Eleanor, don't. Eleanor, child. I said don't, Mama." She reached the foot of the stairs and turned back, and when she spoke again, her face was not angry. That was the worst of it. It was open and hurt and very young. "Did you know?" Margaret did not answer. "Did you know, Mama?" "Yes." "For how long?" "A week, perhaps a little more." "And you did not tell me." "What would I have told you, Eleanor? That your father had no choice, that this house had no choice, that there were 3 letters from Richmond on his desk in April alone, and not one of them carried good news. What would I have said to you, daughter?" "You might have said anything, Mama. A word, one word, so that I did not walk into that study this morning smelling of my own horse and hear it as a sentence." "If I had told you," Margaret whispered, "you would have ridden away from this house and never come back. And I could not let you do that without shoes on your feet and coin in your pocket, child, because I have seen what becomes of girls who run from these bargains in Virginia, and I would not have that become of you." Eleanor looked at her mother for a long, slow moment. "You have been living inside a bargain your whole life, Mama, haven't you?" Margaret did not answer. "And you never told me that either." "Eleanor, you never once in 22 years sat me down and said, 'Daughter, this is what they will do to you. This is the room they will put you in. This is the paper they will ask your father to sign.' You never said it, Mama. You let me ride out every morning like a girl who owned her own body." "Because you did, Eleanor. Every morning. Do not take those mornings from yourself now." "They took them from me an hour ago, Mama." She went up the stairs and came back down 5 minutes later in her riding boots and a brimmed hat pulled low. She crossed the yard to the paddock, where the boy Ezra was rubbing her horse down with a handful of straw. "Saddle him, Ezra." The boy looked up, startled. "Miss Eleanor, he ain't hardly cool." "Saddle him." "Ma'am, he's been rode hard since 4. "Saddle him, Ezra. Now, please." The boy had never in his life heard Miss Eleanor Whitfield say please to a stableman. He saddled the horse. "Miss." "What, Ezra?" "You want I should come behind you." "No." "Miss, your mom'll skin me if I let you ride out alone twice in one day." "Then tell her I rode out without asking Ezra, which will for once be very nearly the truth." She swung up into the saddle. The horse shifted under her. He knew. Horses always knew. "Miss Eleanor." "What?" He looked up at her, and his face was the face of a boy who had heard things in the kitchen that morning and was old enough to understand most of them. "Reckon I'm sorry, miss." She did not answer for a moment. Then she bent down in the saddle and laid her gloved hand on his shoulder just once, very light. "I reckon I know you are," she said. And she rode. She rode hard along the river bottom until the horse slowed of his own accord, and then she let him walk, and only then did the crying come, and it came the way it comes when a person has been holding it in for longer than they knew. She did not hear the other rider until he was almost on her. "Eleanor." She did not turn. "Ride on, Thomas." "Eleanor, for God's sake." "Ride on." Thomas Hale reined his sorrel in beside her anyway. He was in his shirt sleeves because the Virginia sun did not care about a gentleman's dignity in July, and he had the face of a man who had been riding to find her for an hour. "So it is true." "You heard. My father was at the courthouse yesterday. Your father filed the settlement papers before the clerk. Half the county has heard by supper tonight, Eleanor, all of it by Sunday." "Half the county knew before I did." "I am sorry. Are you?" He did not answer quickly. He never did. That was Thomas. She had loved that about him once when she was 16 and he was 20, and she had not yet learned that a thoughtful man was not always a brave one. Eleanor, if there is anything I can do, don't. If there is, Eleanor, I swear to you. Don't, Thomas. Don't stand in this road and say that to me, you of all men. I can speak to your father. My father has signed. I can speak to Reed. She laughed. It was not a kind laugh. You can speak to Nathaniel Reed. You, Thomas Hale. You who could not even speak to my father 3 summers ago when I stood in the garden at my own birthday and asked you to. You who told me in this very road that you had not yet established your practice and could not afford the burden of a wife. You who watched me walk home that afternoon, Thomas Hale, and did not follow. You will now ride to Reed House and tell the beast of Virginia to release me. Eleanor, that is not fair. No, it is not. None of it is fair, Thomas. That is the whole country I was born into. I did not need a gentle man today. I needed one 3 summers ago. I have not needed one since. Eleanor, please. Do you know what I want from you, Thomas Hale? I want you to ride on. I want you to go home and tell your father you saw me on the road, and I looked well, and I was civil. That is what I want. Because if you offer me one more word of comfort, I think I shall shoot you, and I do not have a pistol, so I shall have to do it with my bare hands, and that would embarrass us both. He almost smiled. She had forgotten he could almost smile. You always did speak, he said, as if you had been raised in a courtroom. I was Thomas. Twice a week for 20 years across the supper table from a judge. Eleanor. Ride on, Thomas. He hesitated. And then he did the second unforgivable thing of her day. He tipped his hat and he rode on. She sat her horse in the middle of the road and watched him go. That, she said aloud to the horse, because there was no one else left to say it to, is the last kindness I shall accept from a man of my own choosing for a long while yet. When she came back into the yard in the late afternoon, there was a wagon she did not recognize tied at the front post. She stood in the stirrups a moment looking at that wagon. Then she came down off the horse slowly, the way a person comes down a staircase in the dark. Miss Purdy, the seamstress, met her in the front hall with a mouthful of pins and a measuring tape around her neck. Miss Whitfield, your mother said to stand you by the west window for the light. My mother said. Yes, ma'am, for the wedding dress. Eleanor looked past Miss Purdy and saw her mother in the parlor doorway, hands folded in front of her like a woman at a graveside. For the dress, the ivory silk, ma'am. Come down from Richmond on Tuesday's coach. It'll want taking in at the shoulders, but the length is a marvel. Your mamma has a fine eye for length, Miss Whitfield. Ordered when? The seamstress paused, a pin halfway to her lip. Ma'am. Ordered when, Miss Purdy? When was the silk sent for out of Richmond? I believe it's been near 10 days now, Miss Whitfield. 10 days. Yes, ma'am. The order went out on the 1st of the month, I recollect, because my own boy took it down to the post office, and it was the first day he'd been let drive the wagon alone. He was powerful proud. 10 days, Miss Purdy. Yes, ma'am. Eleanor walked past her into the parlor where Margaret was standing very still. 10 days, Mama. Eleanor. You ordered the silk 10 days ago. Your father. You ordered the silk, Mama. You, not Papa. A judge does not order silk from Richmond. A judge's wife does. You did. Margaret closed her eyes. Yes. So when you told me not 2 hours ago at the foot of your own stairs that you had known for a week. Eleanor, you lied. I did not want... You lied to me, Mama, standing in your own hall. To your own daughter. With your own hand on my wrist. You lied. Eleanor, please. Tell me one more time today, Mama, that you love me. Tell me that today, and I will know something about this world I did not know when the sun came up. Margaret's mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. I thought so, Eleanor said. She did not come down for supper. She did not come down for the evening prayers. She did not come down when Miss Purdy called 3 times up the stairs that she would have to be fitted, ma'am, else the dress would not hang right on the shoulder. She sat on the edge of her bed in her riding clothes until the house went quiet around her, and when the lamps below had all been turned down low, she went to her writing desk and took out a clean sheet of paper. She dipped her pen. At the top of the page, in her own hand, in her own ink, she wrote, "I, Eleanor Whitfield, of sound mind, and 22 years of age, do not consent to this marriage." She looked at the line for a long while. Then she signed it, and she dated it the 29th of July, in the year of our Lord, 1817. The way she had watched her father sign and date 100 contracts in 100 summers. She folded the paper twice, and she put it in the bottom drawer of her desk underneath a bundle of old letters from a cousin in Boston, and a pressed cornflower she had forgotten she kept. Because consent in Virginia in the summer of 1817 was not a thing a woman was asked to give. It was only a thing she could write down in private, in the dark, in her own hand, so that one day, if she lived long enough, she might unfold the paper again and remember that once before they gave her away, she had tried to say no. Somewhere down the Richmond Road, Nathaniel Reed was riding toward this house. He did not yet know her name as anything more than a signature line on a piece of paper. And Eleanor Whitfield, in her father's house in the dark, closed the drawer. She closed the drawer, and she did not sleep. By the time the rooster cut through the Virginia dark, Eleanor Whitfield was already dressed, and she was dressed to fight. Not in the sprigged muslin her mother had laid out the night before. Not in the pale blue walking dress Miss Purdy had pressed for the formal call. Eleanor had pulled on her oldest day gown, the gray one she wore for going through the ledgers in her father's study when the light was bad, and she had pinned her hair plain and low. Margaret came into the bedroom without knocking and stopped in the middle of the floor. "Eleanor?" "No, Mama." "Eleanor, Mr. Reed will be here at 11. "I am aware." "You cannot meet him in that dress." "I can, Mama. I will. And if Papa has something to say about it, he can come up these stairs and say it to my face, which is a courtesy he did not extend to me yesterday." "Child." "Don't child me today, Mama." Margaret's hand went to the back of the chair by the window and stayed there as if she needed something to hold on to. "You would shame him." "I would greet him." "Eleanor, there is a difference between a principle and a picked fight." "There is, and I have had all night to tell the difference. This is a principle, Mama. I am not going to stand in the parlor in ivory ribbons and pretend that a man I have not spoken one word to has earned the sight of me in my good clothes. He has paid." Margaret stopped herself. It was too late. Eleanor turned from the glass very slowly. "Say the rest of that sentence, Mama." "I did not mean—" "Say the rest of it." "Eleanor, please." "He has paid. That is what you were about to say. He has paid, and therefore he is owed the sight of me in ivory ribbons. Go on, Mama. Say it to me in daylight, and we shall both know where we stand." Margaret's eyes closed. "I did not raise you to be cruel, Eleanor." "No, Mama, you raised me to be quiet, and I am afraid I have misplaced the skill overnight." At 11:15, the hoof-beats came up the drive. They came at a walk, not a gallop, not the rushing pace of a young man eager to meet his bride. They came at the deliberate, unhurried walk of a man who had done harder things in his life than present himself at the Whitfield door. Eleanor, at the upstairs window, heard him dismount. She heard him speak to the boy Ezra in the yard, not harshly, not softly, only briefly. "Water him. Don't unsaddle. I do not intend to be long." "I do not intend to be long." Eleanor took hold of the window sash and drew in one slow breath, and then she went down the stairs to meet the man her father had sold her to. He was not what the county had told her. That was the first thing. The beast of Virginia, by all servants' talk and Sunday gossip, was supposed to be a black-browed man with a scar or a limp or at least a hard, cruel mouth. Nathaniel Reed had none of those things. He was tall, and he was lean, the way a man becomes lean who has not sat easy at his own supper table in some years, and his coat was plain dark broadcloth without a single flourish on it. He wore no ring. He wore no watch chain. He stood in her father's parlor with his hat held in both hands in front of him, and the only thing in his face that resembled the rumor was the stillness. He was very, very still. "Mr. Reed," her father said. May I present my daughter, Miss Eleanor Whitfield." Nathaniel Reed's eyes came up. They were gray, not the soft gray of a dove, the hard gray of river water in January. They found Eleanor's face, and they stopped there. He did not bow. He inclined his head, the small, careful inclination of a man who had learned manners late and used them like a rented coat. "Miss Whitfield, Mr. Reed, Eleanor," her mother murmured, "will you sit?" "I will stand, Mamma. I have been sitting a great deal lately. I find it does not suit me." A silence opened in the parlor that was for a moment so wide that Eleanor could hear the clock in the hall and the distant sound of Ezra in the yard trying to keep the man's horse quiet. Nathaniel Reed did not sit either. That Eleanor noted, that she filed away. "Mr. Reed rode from Reed House this morning," her father said into the silence. "He was on the road before 6. "Then Mr. Reed must be thirsty," Eleanor said. "Mamma, perhaps tea." "Tea has been ordered," Margaret said quickly. "Then let us drink tea," Eleanor said, "and let us not pretend." "Eleanor, let us not, Papa. Mr. Reed is a grown man. He has not ridden since dawn to be told charming stories about the weather. He has come to inspect his purchase. Let him inspect it in the light, and let us save him the carriage of polite lies." "Eleanor Whitfield." "It is all right, Judge." They all turned. Nathaniel Reed had not raised his voice. He did not look as though he knew how. But the 3 words had landed in the middle of the parlor with the flat weight of a hand set down on a table, and the judge's sentence stopped halfway out of his mouth. "It is all right," Nathaniel said again, and this time he was looking only at Eleanor. "Miss Whitfield is entitled to her plain speech. I prefer it, in fact. We shall get on better for it." "Get on?" Eleanor repeated. "Yes, ma'am." "Is that what we are to do, Mr. Reed? Get on?" "In time," he said. "I should hope so." "In time." "Yes, ma'am." "How much time, Mr. Reed? Before or after the vow?" Her mother made a small sound. Nathaniel Reed did not flinch. "Miss Whitfield, you are angry." "I am, sir." "You have a right to be." "I am glad to hear it, sir. I was not certain I would be permitted the right in this room before noon." "You are permitted it in any room I am standing in, ma'am. If it is plain speaking you want, we shall have plain speaking. I have had enough of the other kind to last me my days." Eleanor blinked. It was not the answer she had prepared for. She had been ready for coldness. She had been ready for the glance that slid over a woman the way a buyer's glance slid over a heifer at auction. She had been ready for the little smile of a man who had already paid and now wished to be entertained. What she had not been ready for was a tired man in a dark coat hat, in his hands speaking to her as if she were a person. He had just that moment decided he might respect. It threw her. And because Eleanor Whitfield had been thrown once already in 24 hours, she did what she always did when a horse tried to put her in the dust. She gathered the reins. "Mr. Reed." "Ma'am?" "My father tells me you have discharged the debts against this land." "I have, ma'am." "In full." "In full. May I ask the sum?" "Eleanor," her father said sharply. "May I ask the sum, Mr. Reed?" Nathaniel looked once very briefly at Judge Whitfield. Then he looked back at Eleanor, and she saw for the first time something move behind the river gray of his eyes. Not pity. Something colder and more useful than pity. Respect, perhaps. Or the beginning of it. $11,400, Miss Whitfield." Eleanor did not sway. She willed herself not to sway. 11,400. "Papa." "Eleanor, this is not—" "Papa." The judge did not answer. "That is not a debt, Papa. That is a ruin. That is Mr. Whitcomb's farm and old Mr. Arness's farm put together, and the both of them still not dug out. How long, Papa? How long has this house been that many dollars under water?" "Eleanor, enough." "How long, Papa?" 4 years. 4 years, Eleanor. And would have been 6 if your grandmother's silver had not gone down to Richmond in April. which you did not ask about because you were writing, and I did not tell you because you were a daughter. Because I was a daughter. Yes. The word hung in the parlor. Eleanor did not cry. She had cried on the road yesterday. She was not going to cry in front of this stranger in his dark coat. "Mr. Reed," she said, and her voice came out level, and she was proud of the levelness. "I owe you an apology." "You owe me nothing, ma'am. I owe you an apology, sir, because when I came down those stairs, I had decided to be discourteous to you. And I see now that my discourtesy was reserved for the wrong man. My father, it appears, has been carrying this house on his back for 4 years, and telling his wife and his daughter nothing of the weight. You have simply been the man who walked in with the money. Miss Whitfield." "I am not finished, Mr. Reed." "Go on, ma'am." "You have, however, also been the man who looked at a desperate judge and said, 'I will pay what you owe, and in exchange I will take your daughter.' Have you not?" Nathaniel Reed was quiet. "Have you not, Mr. Reed?" "I have, Miss Whitfield." "Then you understand," Eleanor said, "why it is that I do not at this hour quite know which of you two men I hate the more." Margaret gave a small, broken sound. Eleanor did not turn to her mother. "I do not expect you to answer that, Mr. Reed. It was not a question. It was an accounting. I find I have a head for those this morning. Miss Whitfield." "Mr. Reed." "May I speak with you alone?" "No, sir." "I would say a thing to you, ma'am, that I would rather not say in front of your father." "Then you may say it in the garden, Mr. Reed, where my mother may see us from the parlor window, as is proper." "Not because I fear for my honor. My honor was sold last week. But because I will not stand alone in a room with you until I have decided whether I think you a man or a ledger." The judge rose halfway from his chair. "Eleanor." "Sit down, Papa. You have given me away. You do not now also get to give me lessons in courtesy. One or the other." The judge sat back down. Margaret had both her hands pressed flat against her mouth. Nathaniel Reed, for the first time since entering the house, did something with his face that was almost a smile. It was not a full smile. It was barely the shadow of one. It moved at the corner of his mouth for a half a second and was gone again. "Ma'am," he said, "the garden. Outside in the full summer heat, in the smell of box hedge and mown grass, and the lazy drone of 100 bees working the lavender at the south wall." Nathaniel Reed stopped 3 paces from the parlor window, exactly within her mother's sight, and he turned to Eleanor Whitfield and spoke. "I did not know," he said. "Did not know what, sir?" "That you had not been told." "Sir, when I came to the agreement with your father, Miss Whitfield, I understood that you had been consulted." "Consulted?" "Yes, ma'am." "Mr. Reed." "Miss Whitfield. My father informed me yesterday morning, in his study, after I had returned from my ride. My mother had known for 10 days and had ordered the silk out of Richmond. You are now the 3rd person to be in possession of the news before I was, and I find, sir, that the company is not flattering." Nathaniel Reed was silent. "You did not know," she said. "I did not." "Would it have changed your mind?" "I do not know, Miss Whitfield." An honest answer. "I am trying, ma'am, to give you only those." "Then give me one more, sir, if you will." "Why me?" "Ma'am, there are 10 daughters of good family in this county between here and Fredericksburg. Most of them better behaved, all of them better dowered, every single one of them able to pour tea without insulting the guest. Why me, Mr. Reed?" He did not answer quickly. Nathaniel Reed Eleanor had already learned did not answer anything quickly. "3 Christmases ago," he said, "you were in Richmond." "I was." "At the governor's reception." "I was there with my aunt. I was 19. "You were standing," he said, "at the far end of the long room by the window with a glass of something you were not drinking. A man had just said something to you. I did not hear it. I was too far away, but I saw your face when he said it." Eleanor went still. "I do not remember you there, Mr. Reed." "No, ma'am. You would not. I was in mourning black, and I stood at the wall. My wife had been buried 10 months. I did not speak to 4 people the whole evening. You did not see me." "Go on." "The man said his piece, Miss Whitfield, and you did not blush, and you did not smile, and you did not look away. You looked him in the eye, and you answered him, and I do not know what you said, ma'am, but I watched that gentleman walk away from you as if he had been slapped, and he had not been. You had simply spoken to him, and I thought—" He stopped. "Go on, Mr. Reed." "I thought there is a woman who will not lie to save a man's feelings. Not his, not her own, not anyone's. And I thought a man in my condition could do worse one day than a woman who does not lie. Your condition. I am 35 years old, Miss Whitfield. I have been a widower for 3 years and 7 months. I have a house that no one laughs in. I have a staff that speaks to me in whispers, because the last time they heard me raise my voice was the night my son was born and did not live. I do not need a wife who will make me warm, ma'am. I have not earned one. I need a wife who will not lie to me when the house is on fire. That is what I came for. That is what I paid for. And I beg your pardon, Miss Whitfield, for the word paid, but you have used it twice this morning, and I will not be the one to pretend it is not the truth." Eleanor did not speak for a long moment. A bee went past her ear, and she did not swat it. "Mr. Reed." "Ma'am." "That is the longest speech anyone has made to me in 4 years." "I apologize, Miss Whitfield." "Do not. It was the most honest one besides. I shall have to lie down after it." "Ma'am." "Mr. Reed, I have a question. You may refuse it." "Ask, ma'am." "If I stood in front of Reverend Halloway on the last Saturday of this month, and when he asked me for my vow, I said no in front of my father, in front of my mother, in front of every gossiping soul my father has invited, what would you do?" He thought about it. He did not flinch from the question, and he did not rush to answer it. Eleanor noticed that. She realized, be noticing everything about this man from this moment forward for what she guessed was going to be a very long time. "I would ride home, Miss Whitfield." "And the debt?" "Is paid, ma'am. Paid is paid. I do not reclaim money from a man because his daughter had the courage I asked her for." Eleanor looked at him. "You are not what I was told, Mr. Reed." "No, ma'am, I do not believe I am. And yet, ma'am, and yet I will stand in front of Reverend Halloway on the last Saturday of this month, and when he asks me for my vow, I will give it. Do you know why, Mr. Reed?" "Tell me, ma'am." "Because my father has lied to my mother for 4 years to keep this house upright. And my mother has lied to me for 10 days to keep my father upright, and if I say no at that altar, sir, I will be the one who brings all 3 of us down. And I find, Mr. Reed, that I am not quite willing to be that even in a good cause. Not yet. Not this week. Ma'am, I am not finished." "Yes, ma'am. I will give you my vow, Mr. Reed. I will give you my word, because in my family a word given is a word kept, and my mother at least taught me that. But I will not give you my obedience, sir. Not this month, not next, perhaps not ever. And if the rumor is true that your first wife was a gentle woman who did her duty and did not trouble your house, sir, then I should tell you now in this garden before the vow is spoken that you have not married her twice. You have married something else this time, and I do not yet know whether you will be able to bear it." Nathaniel Reed, standing 3 paces from the parlor window, looked at Eleanor Whitfield for a very long moment. Then he said quietly, "I hope that I shall." "That is not an answer, Mr. Reed." "No, ma'am. It is a prayer." He rode out of the yard at 1:15. The boy Ezra had his horse saddled and ready as instructed. He did not stay to dinner. At the window watching him go, Eleanor Whitfield did not cry, and did not speak, and did not turn when her mother came up behind her and laid a hand on her shoulder. "Eleanor." "Not now, Mama." "He is not what they said." "No, Mama, he is not. That is I find the worst part." "Why worst, child?" "Because if he had been what they said, Mama, I could have hated him all my life, and it would have been simple." The next 14 days went the way her mother had planned them to go, and the way her father had paid for them to go, and Eleanor walked through all of it the way a person walks through the rooms of a house they have already decided to leave. Miss Purdy fitted the ivory silk, and then took it out again to let the shoulders. The Reverend Halloway came to call and drank 3 cups of tea and spoke of the catechism, and looked at Eleanor with the careful pity of a man who had married a great many unwilling girls in his time and had learned to keep his opinions inside his collar. Her aunt came down from Alexandria with a gift of lace and stayed 4 days, and every one of those 4 days, she patted Eleanor's hand and said, "He is a man of substance, dear. A man of substance. You will see." Thomas Hale did not come again. That Eleanor also noticed, that she filed beside the other notices. On the Thursday before the wedding, Judge Whitfield stood in the hall and cleared his throat and told his daughter without meeting her eye that Mr. Reed's housekeeper, a Mrs. Abigail Boone, had sent word that Miss Whitfield's rooms at Reed House had been prepared. "Rooms," Eleanor said. "Yes." "Plural, Papa. A bedroom and a sitting room. Mr. Reed has, I understand, instructed that you are to have the east wing to yourself. You are to share only the dining room and the drawing room, unless you indicate otherwise." Eleanor looked at her father. "He has given me my own quarters, Papa." "So I understand." "In a house he paid $11,400 to bring me into." Eleanor: "That is a strange man, Papa. A strange, strange man." Eleanor: "What I meant to say. Do not say it today, Papa. Say it at the altar if you can find the breath. I shall not hear anything more in the hall of this house from you. I am all out of hall." On the last Saturday of July, in the year of our Lord 1817, Eleanor Whitfield walked down the staircase of her father's house in ivory silk that had come from Richmond. She did not wear the veil. Her mother had pleaded. "Eleanor, the veil, child, for the look of it." "No, Mama." "The guests? Let the guests see me, Mama. Let them see what a paid-for bride looks like in the summer light. It is an education they have not had, and they are about due." She carried no flowers. She had said quite calmly at breakfast, "I am not a grave, Mama. I will not be decorated like one." Reverend Halloway at the altar, he had set up against the bay window in the parlor, looked at Eleanor Whitfield without her veil and without her flowers, and he looked at Nathaniel Reed in his plain dark coat, and he looked down at his prayer book, and Eleanor thought afterwards that the old man's hand shook. He spoke the words. Nathaniel Reed said his vow quietly and clearly, and did not take his eyes from her face. When the Reverend Halloway turned to Eleanor, the parlor was so silent that she could hear a bee against the window glass. "Miss Eleanor Whitfield, will you?" "I will." "Have this man?" "Yes, Reverend." "To be thy wedded husband, to live together in the holy estate of matrimony. Will you love him, honor him, comfort him, and keep him in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, keep thee only unto him, so long as ye both shall live?" Eleanor Whitfield looked not at the Reverend, not at her father in the front row, not at her mother with the handkerchief already to her eye. She looked at Nathaniel Reed. "I will love him," she said, "if love comes. I will honor him if honor is earned. I will keep him as the law requires." A small low sound moved through the guests like wind through wheat. Reverend Halloway's hand on the prayer book went white at the knuckle. "Miss Whitfield, I have given my answer, Reverend. You may write what you please in the register. My husband heard what I said." Nathaniel Reed did not move, but in the space of one breath, Eleanor saw something in the river gray of his eyes, a flicker, a small still lamp coming up behind a shutter, and then it was gone again. "I pronounce you," Reverend Halloway said a little hoarse, "husband and wife." Nathaniel Reed did not take her hand. He did not kiss her. He turned at her side and he offered her his arm, and Eleanor Whitfield, who was now before God, and Virginia, and Reverend Halloway. Eleanor Reed laid her fingers lightly upon his sleeve and walked out of her father's parlor for the last time, as a girl who could be called by her father's name. In the yard at the carriage, he handed her up without speaking. He climbed in after her. The door closed. The driver clucked to the horses. They had gone almost half a mile in silence before Nathaniel Reed spoke. "Mrs. Reed." "Say it again, sir. I am not yet accustomed." "Mrs. Reed." "Mr. Reed." "What you said, at the altar." "Yes, sir." "I heard it." "I know you did, sir." "I wanted you to know," he said, "that I heard it, and that I shall hold you to no more than you offered, not a vow more, not a word more, for so long as we both shall live." Eleanor Reed looked at her husband across the narrow carriage. "Mr. Reed." "Ma'am." "That is the second honest speech you have made to me, and we have not yet been married 10 minutes. You are going to exhaust me, sir, at this rate." "I will try, ma'am," he said quietly, "not to." And the carriage went on through the bright Virginia noon, down the long road toward Reed House, where a housekeeper named Mrs. Abigail Boone was standing at the front step in a black dress and a white apron, with her hands folded in front of her, waiting for the carriage that carried the second Mrs. Reed she had lived to see come through that door. Mrs. Abigail Boone did not move from the step as the carriage came up. She watched the horses slow, and she watched the driver swing down, and she watched Nathaniel Reed hand his bride out onto the gravel, and through the whole of it, her hands stayed folded in front of her black apron, like a woman who had been standing in just that place waiting for just this carriage for a very long time. "Mrs. Boone," Nathaniel said. "Mr. Reed." "This is Mrs. Reed." Mrs. Boone's eyes moved to Eleanor. They did not move kindly. "Ma'am," Mrs. Boone said. "Not Mrs. Reed. Ma'am." Eleanor heard it. Nathaniel heard it. The driver climbing back up to his box heard it, and Eleanor saw him look away quickly at the reins the way a man looks away when he has just heard something he will tell his wife about that night. "Mrs. Boone," Eleanor said, and she offered the housekeeper the smallest, cleanest inclination of her head. "I have heard of you." "Have you, ma'am?" "I have. You served the first Mrs. Reed, I understand." "I served her, ma'am. Yes." "How long?" 11 years. 11. "Yes, ma'am." "Then I am sorry for your loss, Mrs. Boone. I mean that. I know what 11 years in a house will build, and I know what the loss of the woman at the center of those years will break. You have my sympathy, and you shall have my respect if you will have mine in return." Mrs. Boone did not answer. She turned instead without a word, and opened the front door, and she held it open for them, the way a servant holds a door open with her eyes on the threshold and not on the faces of the people passing through. Eleanor stepped across. Nathaniel stepped across behind her. And Eleanor Reed, in ivory silk that had come from Richmond, walked into a house that did not want her, while a woman in a black apron stood behind her and closed the door with both hands. "Mrs. Boone." "Mr. Reed." "You will show Mrs. Reed to her rooms." "Yes, sir." "You will show her the east wing entire, every door, every cupboard. You will answer every question she asks you as you would have answered one of mine." "Yes, sir." "Mrs. Boone." "Sir." "Look at me, please." Mrs. Abigail Boone raised her eyes to her master's face. Nathaniel Reed did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Eleanor was learning quickly that Nathaniel Reed had never in his life needed to. "This is the second Mrs. Reed who will live under this roof," he said. "There will not be a third. She is my wife before the law and before God, and she is the mistress of this house from this hour. You will carry yourself accordingly. Mrs. Boone, or you will carry your things down to the lodge, and I will write you a character that does you justice for 11 years of service, and we shall part as friends. Do you understand me?" Mrs. Boone's mouth went white at the corners. "I understand you, sir." "Good." He did not wait to see whether his housekeeper bowed. He turned to Eleanor instead. "Mrs. Reed." "Sir." "I have matters with Caleb Turner in the south barn that will keep me until supper. If you want for anything before then, Mrs. Boone will fetch it, or she will fetch the person who can. If she does not, she will, sir." "Mrs. Reed." "She will, Mr. Reed. Go to your barn." He looked at her one moment longer. Then he inclined his head, and he was gone down the hall, and Eleanor Reed was alone in her husband's front hall with a woman who had been waiting 11 years for her not to exist. "This way, ma'am." "Mrs. Boone?" "Ma'am." "Before you show me a single door in this house." "Ma'am." "I did not want to come here." Mrs. Boone stopped with her hand on the banister. "I did not want to come here," Eleanor said again quietly. "I was brought. You know that. Every soul in this county knows it by now. I will not stand in your front hall and pretend otherwise, Mrs. Boone, because I have had in the last 3 weeks a bellyful of people pretending. So, now you know. And now I know that you know. And we may proceed up that staircase as 2 grown women and not as 2 liars. Does that suit you, Mrs. Boone? Mrs. Abigail Boone looked at Eleanor Reed for a long moment. It suits me, ma'am. Good. But I will tell you a thing, ma'am, in return. Tell me. She was a good woman. I do not doubt it. You will not replace her, ma'am. I do not wish to, Mrs. Boone. I could not if I tried. I have not come here to be Anne Reed. I have come here to be Eleanor Reed, which is a thing this house has not yet seen, and which I suspect will take some getting used to for you and for me both. Mrs. Boone's eyes did something that was not quite softening. This way, ma'am. She did not come down for supper. A tray was sent up at 7:30. Cold ham, bread, preserves, a small pitcher of cider, a single candle. Eleanor did not touch it. She sat at the window of her sitting room in her ivory silk because she would not ring for anyone to help her out of it, and she watched the light go out of the sky over her husband's fields, and at 10 o'clock she heard his boot on the stair in the far hall and heard the door of the west wing close, and she understood that her husband had no more intention of coming to her tonight than he had intention of walking on water. She was glad. She told herself she was glad. She sat up until past midnight, writing in a small ledger she had carried in her trunk, and she did not write poetry because Eleanor Whitfield had never been a girl for poetry. She wrote numbers. 11,400 paid by N.R. to S.W. 4 years arrears on taxes unknown. Ask. Wages last paid at Reed House. Ask Mrs. B. Storehouses ask C. Turner. Tenant roll ask. She blew out the candle at 1:15, and she lay down in a bed that smelled faintly unmistakably of cedar and lavender and a woman's sachet that had been laid there some time ago and never quite aired out. She did not cry. She had cried on the road to Richmond in her mind 100 times in the last 3 weeks. She had cried yesterday in her old room. She did not intend to cry in a bed that still carried another woman's smell. At 6 in the morning, Eleanor Reed came down the staircase in a gray working dress with her hair pinned up plain, and she walked into the kitchen before the cook had the first fire lit. Mrs. Boone was at the table with a cup of chicory, and she stood up so fast her chair went back. Ma'am. Sit, Mrs. Boone. Finish your coffee. Ma'am, this is not Mrs. Boone. Ma'am? I would like the household ledgers. Mrs. Boone blinked. Ma'am, the household ledgers. The book where you write what was spent on flour last month, and what was spent on candles, and how many hams went down to the smokehouse, and how many came out. You keep such a book, do you not, Mrs. Boone? I do, ma'am, but— Fetch it, please. Ma'am, Mr. Reed keeps the main books. I did not ask for the main books, Mrs. Boone. I asked for yours. Mrs. Boone went. She came back with a brown leather ledger, and she laid it on the kitchen table, and she stood back from it. There, ma'am. Thank you. Sit. Ma'am. Sit, Mrs. Boone. I am going to ask you questions, and I will ask them faster than I can stand, and you will answer them faster than you can stand. So sit, please, and drink your coffee before it is stone cold, and we shall begin. Mrs. Boone sat, and Eleanor Reed in the kitchen of a house she had not chosen at 6 o'clock in the morning of the first day of her marriage opened a brown leather ledger and began line by line to learn what kind of house Nathaniel Reed had bought her into. By 8 o'clock she knew. By 8 o'clock Eleanor Reed had a headache, and she had ink on 2 of her fingers, and she knew 3 things she had not known when she sat down. She knew that the house ran on 8 servants where it ought to run on 12. She knew that the wages to those 8 servants had last been raised the year before Anne Reed died. And she knew that there was a line in Mrs. Boone's ledger written in the housekeeper's careful hand that said, Mrs. R.'s sitting room, no entry, per Mr. R.'s standing order, October 14th, 1813. Eleanor looked up from the page. Mrs. Boone? Ma'am? What is in this room? Mrs. Boone did not answer. What is in this room, Mrs. Boone? Ma'am, Mr. Reed. I am not asking Mr. Reed, Mrs. Boone. I am asking the woman who has kept this ledger for 11 years, what is in this room? Mrs. Boone looked down at her hands. Her things, ma'am. Anne's. Yes, ma'am. As she left them, ma'am. Her sewing, her writing box. Her Bible is still on the table by the chair. There is a shawl on the back of the chair. She set it there the morning she went into her confinement, ma'am, and she never came back down to fetch it. And Mr. Reed has not in 3 years and 7 months crossed that threshold. No one has been in that room. No one, ma'am. Not you. I go in once a month, ma'am, to dust, only to dust, by his leave. I do not touch a single thing. I dust around the shawl, ma'am. I dust around the Bible. Eleanor closed the ledger. Mrs. Boone. Ma'am. Will you show me that room? Ma'am, I cannot. Not today, Mrs. Boone. I am not asking today, but one day. When you are ready, when I am ready, because I will not live in a house where a door is locked against me, and I will not, on the other hand, be the woman who kicks that door in when a good woman's shawl is still on the chair. So one day, when you are ready, you will show me that room, Mrs. Boone. And on that day, you will tell me about her. Because this house cannot breathe Mrs. Boone, while a dead woman's sitting room is the one room in it that no one is allowed to walk into. Mrs. Boone's eyes filled. She did not let the tears fall. Mrs. Abigail Boone had not let a tear fall in front of a Reed in 30 years of service, and she was not going to begin in this kitchen. Yes, ma'am, she said. One day. Good. Now is there coffee in that pot, or has it gone to sludge? It has gone to sludge, ma'am. Then make fresh, Mrs. Boone, if you will, because I have been up since 5, and my husband will be in from the south barn directly, and I would rather not meet him over cold coffee. It is the kind of thing a marriage does not recover from. Mrs. Boone almost smiled. Yes, ma'am. Nathaniel came in at 8:15 with dust on his boots, and Caleb Turner's voice still in his ear, and he stopped in the door of the dining room because his wife was at the table in a gray working dress with a ledger open beside her plate and a cup of fresh coffee in her hand, and she did not rise when he came in. Mrs. Reed. Mr. Reed. You are up. I have been up. Sit down, please, Mr. Reed. Your eggs are getting cold, and I have 4 questions before you go out again. He sat. He did not laugh. Nathaniel Reed did not, as far as Eleanor had yet observed, laugh. But something moved at the corner of his mouth that was the cousin of a laugh, and he reached for the coffee. 4 questions, Mrs. Reed. 4. Go on. 1. The wages of the house staff have not been raised in 4 years. Why? He set the cup down. Mrs. Reed, It was not an accusation, Mr. Reed, it was a question. Why? Because the year they ought to have been raised, ma'am, I was not able to read an account book. I could not sit in a room with numbers in it, and by the time I could, I had forgotten that it was a thing that ought to be done. Eleanor held his eyes a moment. Thank you for answering plainly. Go on, ma'am. 2. Mrs. Boone tells me there are 8 house servants where there ought to be 12. Why? 4 left in the year after my wife died, Mrs. Reed. I did not replace them. I did not wish to interview a stranger. Plainly again, thank you. 3. Ma'am? Caleb Turner, your steward. Yes. Mrs. Boone tells me he is a hard man and a fair one, and that the tenants trust him more than they trust you. Is that so? It is so. Why do they not trust you, Mr. Reed? Because I have not ridden the tenant line in 2 years, Mrs. Reed. I send Caleb. They have learned to speak to Caleb. They have unlearned, I suppose, the habit of speaking to me. Then you will take me out on the tenant line this week. Mrs. Reed. Not to charm them, sir. I do not charm. To meet them, because I am their mistress now, whether they would have me or not, and I will not have them learning my name from Mrs. Boone's back steps. I will bring my name to them myself. On your arm, Mr. Reed, if you will, because you are their master, and they have not seen their master on the tenant line in 2 years. And that is, forgive me, sir, not the failing of any servant in this house. Nathaniel Reed looked at his wife across the table. What is the 4th, Mrs. Reed? The 4th, Mr. Reed, will wait until you have finished your eggs. I am finished, ma'am. Then the 4th is this, sir. There is a locked sitting room in the east wing of this house. He went still. Mrs. Reed, I am not asking to enter it, sir. Not today, not this month. I would not cross that threshold if you threw the key at me, sir, which I do not believe you are about to do. I am only telling you in this dining room over coffee that I know it is there, that I know whose it was, that I know no one has been in it in 3 years and 7 months except Mrs. Boone once a month to dust around a Bible and a shawl. I am telling you that I know Mr. Reed because I will not live in a house where a thing that large is kept from me in silence. I do not need you to speak of her today. I need you, sir, to know that when you are ready to speak of her, I will be in this house, and I will be listening. Nathaniel Reed's hand on the coffee cup had gone very white at the knuckle. Mrs. Reed. Sir. You are not, he said quietly, what I was told I was getting. No, Mr. Reed, I am not. I made that plain at the altar yesterday. I am making it plain again this morning. I shall, I suspect, go on making it plain for some years yet. You may as well begin, sir, to eat your breakfast in the knowledge of it. He did not answer, but when he stood some minutes later to go out again to Caleb Turner and the South Barn and the business of a farm that did not care about the marriages of its master, he stopped at the door. Mrs. Reed? Mr. Reed? Tomorrow. Tomorrow, sir. The tenant line. Tomorrow. I shall have the gig brought round at 9, if the weather holds. It will not hold, Mr. Reed. Ma'am, my father says there is a storm coming up from the Sound, sir. He had it from a man off a Norfolk boat, a bad one, by Friday at the latest. Nathaniel looked at her. You listen, Mrs. Reed, to your father's weather talk. I listen, Mr. Reed, to every man who has a reason to be right. My father is wrong about a great many things. He has never in 22 years been wrong about the weather. Then we shall ride the line tomorrow, and we shall be home by 2, and we shall be ready for the storm by Friday. Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Mr. Reed. He went out. The storm came Thursday night, not Friday. Her father had been off by a day. Eleanor at the window of her sitting room listened to the first heavy drops hit the glass at 9:15, and she was on her feet before the first crack of thunder. Mrs. Boone met her in the upstairs hall with a candle. Ma'am, Mr. Reed is out. Out where? Southfield, ma'am. He went with Caleb and 2 of the boys. There's a string of colts in the lower paddock that weren't brought up in time. He said he would fetch them himself. In this? In this, ma'am. How long has he been out? An hour, ma'am, perhaps a little more. Eleanor was already on the stairs. Ma'am, you cannot, Mrs. Boone. Ma'am, the rain. Fetch me the oldest cloak in this house, the roughest. Not mine. Mine is not fit. And a lantern. Mrs. Boone, a lantern with a good wick, and tell the kitchen to put hot water on, because when my husband comes back through that door, I do not intend to have him catch his death in his own hall. Ma'am, you do not know the lower paddock. Then draw me a line, Mrs. Boone, on a piece of paper with a pencil in the next 90 seconds, and I shall know it by the time I reach the gate. She was out of the house in under 5 minutes. She was out in the wet, with a lantern and a cloak that had belonged, she discovered later, to Mrs. Boone's own father. She found Nathaniel Reed and Caleb Turner, and 2 half-drowned boys, at the lower paddock, trying to move a string of 4 colts through a gate. The wind had half pulled off its hinges, and the laid colt was fighting the rope, and Nathaniel had a bleeding cut across his forearm. And when he looked up and saw his wife coming toward him out of the rain with a lantern, the look that went across his face was not anger. It was not anger. Eleanor. He had never in the 3 weeks she had known him used her Christian name. Hold the gate, Mr. Reed. Eleanor, go back. Hold the gate. I will take the lead rope. He will come for a woman's hand, sir, and he will not come for yours, because he can smell blood on your sleeve. Hold the gate. Caleb, the lantern. The second rope, please. Now. They got the colts through in 9 minutes. Later, Caleb Turner would tell his wife over their own supper table that in 12 years of service, he had never seen Mrs. Reed the first do in a summer afternoon what Mrs. Reed the second did in a storm at night. He said nothing of the sort to anyone at Reed House. But when they were all of them back in the big kitchen, steaming, the 2 boys wrapped in blankets, Caleb with a mug of hot cider in both hands, Mrs. Boone scolding over the mud on her floor in a voice that had more relief in it than she would ever admit. Eleanor Reed pushed the wet hair out of her eyes and looked across the table at her husband. He was looking at her. He was looking at her the way a man looks at a thing he has not yet decided whether he is permitted to want. Eleanor held his eyes a moment. And then, for the first time since a judge had told her in his study that she had been promised. Eleanor Reed laughed. It was a short laugh. It was not much of one. It was the laugh of a woman who had just discovered in her own throat that the sound still worked. And Nathaniel Reed across the kitchen laughed back. It was shorter than hers. It was rougher. It was the laugh of a man who had not used the muscle in 3 years and 7 months and was discovering to his own alarm that he still had it. Caleb Turner at the far end of the table looked down very carefully at his cider and did not raise his eyes because Caleb Turner was a man of sense, and a man of sense does not stare at a thing that has just that moment begun to happen. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor Reed rode the tenant line with her husband on a Wednesday and a Thursday and a Monday, and she met 11 families, and by the third visit, she knew the Christian names of every child in every cabin, and by the fifth visit, 2 of the tenant wives had begun shyly to call her Mrs. Reed instead of ma'am. She wrote letters at night in her sitting room and did not send them. She wrote one to her mother and did not send it. She wrote one to Thomas Hale and burned it before the ink was dry. She heard one evening through the closed door of the west wing the sound of a violin being played badly, and she stopped in the hall with her hand halfway to her own doorknob and listened for a full 2 minutes before she understood what the sound was and who was making it. And then she turned and went into her room and closed the door very quietly, because she understood as surely as she had ever understood anything that Nathaniel Reed did not know she was in the hall, and that Nathaniel Reed had not played that violin in front of a living soul since before his wife died, and that a woman who walked in on a man playing a violin he had not touched in 3 years and 7 months was a woman who had broken something in the walls of the house that could not be mended. She let him keep it. She mentioned the violin to no one, not Mrs. Boone, not Caleb, not on the Sunday he rode over with a letter from her mother and a face full of unspoken apology to Thomas Hale. On a Thursday in early September, Nathaniel Reed came in from the south barn at dusk and found his wife at the long table in the dining room with 3 open ledgers and a pot of cold tea and ink on the side of her hand, and he stood in the doorway for a long moment and did not come in. "Mr. Reed?" "Mrs. Reed." "Sit." "Ma'am." He sat. He did not reach for the tea. He did not reach for the ledgers. He put his hands flat on the table on either side of the place the cook had set for him, and he looked at his wife. "Mrs. Reed." "Sir?" "In Richmond." "Yes, Mr. Reed." "The man who spoke to you at the reception." She went still. "Yes." "Do you remember what he said to you?" "I remember." "Will you tell me?" "No, Mr. Reed." "Ma'am, I will not tell you, sir, because if I tell you, you will ride to Richmond next week and find that man, and you will horsewhip him in the street, and I will not have my husband hanged for my honor 3 weeks into a marriage. That is one reason. The other is my own, which is that I said a thing to that man in Richmond that I am not proud of, and I do not wish to hear it in my own dining room in my own voice. Mrs. Reed, Mr. Reed, I told you in your father's garden that I chose you because you did not lie. You did, sir. I am asking you now not to lie to me." "I am not lying, Mr. Reed." "You are keeping." "I am keeping, sir. They are not the same thing. A wife is permitted by the law of God and the habit of sense to keep a thing or two from her husband in the first month of a marriage. Ask me in a year, Mr. Reed. I may tell you in a year." "In a year, Mrs. Reed." "In a year, sir." He was quiet a long moment. "I find," he said, "that I am willing to wait a year." "That is good of you, sir." "Mrs. Reed." "Mr. Reed, I came in tonight to say a thing to you." "Say it then." "I am," he said slowly, "beginning to be glad that you did not refuse me at the altar." Eleanor put down her pen. "Mr. Reed." "Ma'am." "Do not say that to me." "I beg your pardon." "Do not say it to me, sir. Not tonight. Not like that. Because I know what you are asking. You are asking me, without asking, to be the thing that warms this house. You are asking me to be the light. You are asking me, sir, to be the woman who walks into your west wing and plays the violin with you, and dusts your wife's Bible and wakes this house up. And I cannot be that, Mr. Reed. Not on command, not for rescue, not because you are beginning to be glad. I did not come here to save you, sir. If I warm this house, I shall warm it for my own sake, not yours. Do you hear me? I hear you, Mrs. Reed. Do you? I do. Good. She picked up her pen. He did not move. Eat, Mr. Reed. The cook will take it personally if you do not. He ate. They did not speak again that night, but when Eleanor Reed went up the stairs at 10:15 with a candle in her hand, she stopped at the door of the east wing, and she did not open it at once, because she had heard again through the west wall the first soft scrape of a bow being drawn across a string that had not been tuned in 3 years and 7 months. She listened for 1 bar. She listened for 2. She went into her own room and she closed her own door, and she set the candle down on her own writing desk. And there, in the small stack of correspondence, Mrs. Boone had laid out for her that afternoon her mother's letter, a bill from Richmond. A Sunday invitation from the Reverend Halloway's wife was a single folded paper Eleanor had not put there, tied with a faded black ribbon, and written across the front of it in a woman's hand she did not know were 3 words. At 9 o'clock the next morning, Eleanor Reed stood in the east hallway of her husband's house in a plain dark dress with her hair pinned up simple, and she waited. She did not knock at the door of Anne Reed's sitting room. She did not touch the knob. She stood 3 paces back from the wood, and she waited because she had told Nathaniel at 1 o'clock in the morning that they would open the door together, and she was not about to be the first hand on it. At 3 minutes past 9, she heard his step. He came down the hall in his shirt sleeves. He had shaved. His hair was still damp. His eyes, when they met hers, were the eyes of a man who had not yet slept, but who had in the last 8 hours decided something. Mrs. Reed. Mr. Reed. I have the key. I see it, sir. Eleanor. Nathaniel. Before I turn it. Yes. If I cannot. You can. If I cannot, Eleanor. Then we will stand in this hall a while, sir, and we will try again tomorrow. There is no hour on the clock by which this door must be open. Turn it when you can turn it. He did not answer. He stepped forward. He put the key in the lock. His hand shook. He stopped. Eleanor. Yes, Nathaniel. Your hand on mine. She did not hesitate. She put her hand on his hand on the key, and she did not press. She only laid her fingers over his, and she felt the tremor in them, and she felt it slow, and she felt him take 1 breath and another, and then she felt him turn the key. The lock gave. The door swung open under the weight of his shoulder, and Nathaniel Reed stood in the threshold of a room he had not crossed the line of in 3 years and 7 months. He did not go in at once. Eleanor did not push him. Eleanor did not speak. Eleanor stood at his elbow with her hand still laid lightly over the back of his, and she waited. Eleanor. Yes, Nathaniel. The shawl. I see it, sir. She set it there. Yes, Nathaniel. The morning she went into her confinement, she set it on the back of that chair, and she said she would come down for it after when the worst was over, and she did not. And I have walked past that closed door twice a day for 3 years and 7 months. Eleanor and I have thought of that shawl every single time. Yes, Nathaniel. I cannot leave it there. No, sir. I cannot burn it either. No, sir. You do not have to do either today. You have opened the door. That is today's work. The shawl will wait. He looked at her. Eleanor. Nathaniel. Will you come in with me? Yes. She stepped across the threshold at his side. Mrs. Boone at the far end of the hall had come silently up the staircase and was standing with both hands pressed to her mouth. Eleanor saw her. Nathaniel did not. Eleanor did not turn Mrs. Boone away, and did not acknowledge her either. She left the old woman in the hall because Mrs. Abigail Boone had as much right to that threshold as any living soul in the house, and more than most. Inside, Nathaniel went to the chair. He did not touch the shawl at first. He stood in front of it with his hands open at his sides, like a man waiting to be given permission, and at last he reached out and he laid his palm flat on the wool, not lifting it, not gathering it up, only touching it, the way a man touches the shoulder of a person he is saying goodbye to. Anne. Eleanor did not move. Anne, I am sorry. He did not say it loud. He said it the way a man says a thing he has been practicing in his head for 3 years and 7 months. I am sorry I did not open your letter. I am sorry I locked this door. I am sorry I made of you what you asked me not to make. I am sorry, Anne. I have been a coward in this house, and I have let a good woman become a ghost, and that was not what you asked for. Forgive me. He lifted the shawl. He folded it twice the way a man folds a flag. He is handing to a mourner, and he turned and he laid it across the chair's seat, not across its back, and he stood a moment longer, and then he came back to Eleanor. Mrs. Reed. Mr. Reed. The Bible stays. Yes, sir. The writing box stays. I will not touch it. Perhaps one day. Not today. Yes, sir. The rest of the room, the curtains, the chair covers, the small things, Mrs. Boone will know what she meant and what she did not. I will leave that to Mrs. Boone, and to you. Yes, Nathaniel. The shawl. Yes. I am not going to burn it, Eleanor. She asked me to, and I am not going to. I am going to fold it in paper, and I am going to put it in the cedar chest at the foot of my own bed, where it will not be on display, and will not be a shrine, but where it will also not be gone. Is that, do you think that is? It is right, Nathaniel? Eleanor, it is right. Put it where you can find it when you need to, and where it does not stop anyone else from walking in a room. That is what she asked. Do that. He nodded. He went to the door. Mrs. Boone in the hallway had not moved. Nathaniel looked at her. He did not speak for a moment. Mrs. Boone? Sir? You kept her for me. I kept what I could, sir. 11 years of service in her life, Mrs. Boone. 3 years and 7 months after. That is 14 years and 7 months you have carried this woman in this house. I have not thanked you for a single one of them. Mrs. Boone was weeping openly now. She did not bother to hide it. Sir, Mrs. Boone. Sir, I should have given you the letter. Mrs. Boone, you gave me the letter on the day I could read it. Not before, not after. On the day I could read it. And you will never, so long as I live, hear from me one word of reproach for the keeping of it. Do you hear me? I hear you, sir. Go and sit down, Mrs. Boone. The cook will bring you tea. I do not want to see you on your feet again in this house before the dinner bell. Mrs. Reed will manage the morning. Yes, sir. She went. Nathaniel Reed, in the east hallway of his own house, stood a moment with his hand on the frame of an open door, and then he turned to his wife, and he did a thing that a man of his disposition had not Eleanor guessed done in the whole 35 years of his life. He smiled. It was not much of a smile. It was brief. It was tired. It did not reach all the way to his eyes, because the eyes of a man who has just spoken to his dead wife do not on that morning reach any smile all the way. But it was a smile. Mrs. Reed. Mr. Reed. I find I am hungry. Mr. Reed. Ma'am? You have not eaten in 3 days, sir. Of course you are hungry. Go down to the kitchen. Cook has bacon. Do not argue with her about the bread. Eleanor. Go down, Nathaniel. He went. Eleanor stood a moment longer in the east hallway in front of the open door of Anne Reed's sitting room, and she did not go in again. She closed the door. She did not lock it. The weeks that followed were not the weeks of a novel. No one in Reed House, least of all Eleanor, had the time for a novel. There were wages to be raised, and there were 4 servants to be hired, and there was a long letter from Eleanor's mother that arrived on a Tuesday and sat on her writing desk for 6 days before Eleanor opened it. Eleanor raised the wages on a Wednesday. She did it in the kitchen with Mrs. Boone at her elbow, and she did not make a speech of it. She called in each of the 8 servants one at a time, and she told them plainly what they had been paid and what they were going to be paid from the 1st of October. And she told them the raise was not a gift, and was not a favor, and was not for the love of God, a reward for good behavior. It was, she said, what they had been owed for 4 years, and she was ashamed on behalf of the house that it had been so long in coming. The cook cried. The cook was a woman of 53 who had not, in Mrs. Boone's memory, cried once in the Reed kitchen, and Eleanor held her hand for a full minute across the kitchen table, and then Eleanor said, "And I shall have the bacon now, Mrs. Coombs, if you can find your way clear. I have ridden the tenant line since 7, and I could eat the strap off my own boot." Mrs. Coombs laughed. The cook laughed, and Mrs. Boone at the doorway heard a sound in her kitchen she had not heard in 3 years and 7 months. On the Sunday, after Nathaniel Reed came back into the parish church for the first time since his wife had been buried out of it, he sat in the Reed pew with Eleanor at his side. He did not look around. He did not speak to a soul on the steps afterward, except the Reverend Halloway, to whom he said quietly, "Good morning, Reverend." And the Reverend Halloway, who had married and buried more of Virginia than any man in the county, answered with the only word he had ready, "Welcome home, sir." It went round the county by Tuesday. By Thursday it had reached Richmond, and by the following Friday it had reached a man named Jasper Caldwell, who was a cousin of the first Mrs. Reed, and who had spent 3 years and 7 months waiting very patiently for a letter he now wrote in one sitting with a glass of brandy at his elbow, and which arrived at Reed House by courier on a Tuesday morning at 11. Nathaniel read it in the study. He did not come out of the study for 40 minutes. When he came out with the letter in his hand, and he came out to find his wife, and he found her in the long dining room going through the tenant ledger with Caleb Turner. "Caleb." "Mr. Reed." "Leave us, please." Caleb looked once at Eleanor. Eleanor nodded. Caleb went. "Mrs. Reed." "Mr. Reed." "There is a suit." "A suit, sir. A civil suit, filed in Richmond on Monday. I have had the letter of record this hour. Jasper Caldwell, Anne's mother's sister's son. He is claiming that a portion of this estate, the river parcel, the West Mill, and the 200 acres of bottomland my father bought from his father in 1802, came to me through Anne, and that upon my remarriage, that property ought to revert to Anne's line, to him." "On what ground, sir?" "On the ground, Mrs. Reed, that I have by remarrying disgraced the memory of his cousin. He is, he says, moving on principle." "Principle." "His word, not mine." "And the money, sir?" "The money is 6,000 acres, Eleanor, give or take, and the West Mill pays $1,100 a year." Eleanor set down her pen. "Then this is not principle, Mr. Reed." "No, Mrs. Reed, it is not." "When is the hearing?" "The 20th, the Circuit Court in Richmond." 11 days. 11 days. "And in those 11 days, Nathaniel, there will be talk." "There is talk already, Mrs. Reed. The letter names you." She went still. "Names me how, sir?" "It calls you, ma'am, an opportunist of unfortunate family circumstance who prevailed upon the grief of Mr. Reed to secure a position to which she had no natural claim." "Let me see the letter." "Eleanor, let me see it, sir. I would rather read it with my own eye than hear you trying to soften it with your own mouth." He gave her the letter. She read it. She read it through to the end, and then she read it through a second time, because Eleanor Whitfield Reed had been raised across a supper table from a judge, and she knew how to read a civil complaint, and she was not going to let Jasper Caldwell insult her on a single clause she had not examined. She put the letter down. "Nathaniel." "Eleanor." "Did he know my father?" "I beg your pardon, ma'am." "Jasper Caldwell. Did he know my father, before this, socially, in Richmond?" Yes. They were acquainted. Caldwell's father sat on the bank board at the same time as your—" "Then this suit, Mr. Reed, was not an accident of the Reverend Halloway's welcome last Sunday. It was written before you walked back into that church. It was written, I suspect, a long while before. And Sunday was the excuse, not the spark." Nathaniel stared at her. "Eleanor, he has been waiting for you to do something he could call a disgrace, Mr. Reed. He has been waiting 3 years and 7 months for you to remarry, or to lose the farm, or to ride into a ditch drunk, or to give him any thread he could pull. You have given him the remarriage. I am the thread. That is all this is. We have not been slandered by a grieving cousin. We have been hunted, sir, by a patient one." Nathaniel Reed looked at his wife for a long moment. "Mrs. Reed." "Yes, sir." I have in my life been married to 2 women. I did not know until this moment that I had married a lawyer the second time. I was not raised, Mr. Reed, to be one. I was raised in the same room as one. There is a difference, but it is not large. What do? We answer it, sir. In court, and before court. And I will tell you, Mr. Reed, what I will not do. I will not hide in this house for 11 days while a man in Richmond tells the county that I married you for the rent roll of a West Mill. I will not give him the satisfaction of my silence. I will not permit him to be the only voice in the parish by Sunday. Do you hear me? I hear you, Eleanor. Then we ride into Richmond tomorrow. Tomorrow morning. You and I. You in your dark coat. I in my best. We call on the Reverend Halloway's brother-in-law at the Richmond bar. We call on 2 of your father's old friends, and we call Nathaniel. This is the part you will not like. We call on my father. Your father, Mrs. Reed. My father, sir. Eleanor, your father. My father sold me to you for $11,400 in July, Nathaniel. And he has lived with that for 10 weeks. He has written to me twice, and I have answered neither letter. He is, at this moment, I suspect, a man looking for any honorable thing he can do before he is in his grave. We are going to give him one. We are going to let him stand in a courtroom in Richmond on the 20th of this month and say in open court that his daughter is no opportunist. And Jasper Caldwell, Mr. Reed, will find that the judge who raised me still knows his way around a room of gentlemen. Nathaniel was quiet. Eleanor. Yes. You have not forgiven him. No, Nathaniel. I have not. And you are going to his door tomorrow. I am. Why? Because, sir, there is a difference between forgiving a man and using him. My father owes me a debt that no court will ever try. I cannot make him pay it, but I can make him spend in my service what honor he has left, and I intend to. I have been a daughter in that house for 22 years, Nathaniel. I am going to be for 1 week the client. Eleanor. Yes. If I say to you right now that I love you. She looked up. He did not say it like a man in a novel. He said it like a man who had been in the South Barn for 3 nights and had come to a conclusion. If I say that, Eleanor. Do not say it today, Nathaniel. Eleanor. Do not say it today, sir. Not because I do not wish to hear it. Because if you say it to me today, I shall have to decide whether I said it back, because I meant it, or because a man in Richmond has just called me an opportunist, and I will not let Jasper Caldwell be the reason I tell my husband I love him. Say it to me after the 20th, Nathaniel. Say it to me when there is no courtroom between us. I shall answer you then. After the 20th. After the 20th. Eleanor. Yes, I shall hold you to that. I hope you will, sir. They rode into Richmond on a Wednesday. They stood in Judge Samuel Whitfield's study on a Thursday afternoon, and Eleanor's father rose when she came through the door, and he did not sit again for the whole of the interview, and at the end of it, when his daughter put before him the letter of Jasper Caldwell, and said quietly, "Papa, I have not come to ask forgiveness, and I have not come to give any. I have come because you owe me, and you know you owe me, and I am calling the debt." Judge Whitfield bowed his head once, and he said, "Tell me what you need, Eleanor." And Eleanor Reed told him. On the 20th of October, in the Circuit Court at Richmond, before a bench of 3 judges and a room full of the curious Jasper Caldwell's suit was dismissed in 46 minutes. Judge Samuel Whitfield did not sit on the panel. Judge Samuel Whitfield stood at the front bench in a plain dark coat of his own, and he spoke for 11 minutes, and at the end of those 11 minutes, there was not a man in the room who did not understand that to call Eleanor Reed an opportunist was to call her father a liar. And there was not a man in Richmond who was willing that afternoon to call Judge Whitfield a liar in open court. Nathaniel Reed sat in the front row of the benches with his wife at his right hand, and when the judges stood, and when the clerk called the next matter, Nathaniel Reed stood up, and he turned not to the door, but to the center of the room, and he said not loudly, not to the bench, only to the 40 or so men and women who had come to watch a scandal, "Gentlemen, ladies." They went still. "I have not," Nathaniel Reed said, "spoken in this town in 3 years and 7 months. I shall not make a practice of it. I shall say one thing and I shall go." No one moved. "The woman at my side," he said, "is Eleanor Reed. She is my wife. She is not a replacement. She is not a consolation. She is not an opportunist of unfortunate family circumstance. She is a grown woman who was sold to me by her father for $11,400 in the month of July, and who has in the months since opened a room in my house that I could not open, and raised the wages of my servants that I had neglected, and ridden my tenant line that I had forsaken, and asked nothing of me in return, but that I choose her, which I do. In this room, publicly, before God and before my neighbors, I choose her. And if any man in this county has from this hour forward one unkind word to say of her, he may bring it to me directly, and he may bring it in daylight, and he may bring it with his sleeves rolled up, because my door is open, gentlemen, and my days of hiding in a locked room are done. Good afternoon." He sat down. The room did not know what to do. Eleanor Reed at his side did not weep, and did not smile, and did not for one long second breathe. She reached instead very quietly, and she laid her hand on her husband's hand on the bench between them, and she did not speak until they were out of the courtroom and out of the hall and out on the stone steps of the Richmond courthouse in the autumn sun. "Nathaniel." "Eleanor." "The 20th is over, sir." "Yes, Mrs. Reed. Say it to me now." "I love you, Eleanor." "I know, Nathaniel." "Eleanor." "I love you, sir. I did not mean to. I did not plan to. I married you in ivory silk with my teeth set. Nathaniel Reed and I swore at your altar that I would love you only if love came. And I will tell you, sir, for the public record of a stone step in Richmond, that love came. I did not give it. It was taken out of me by a man who opened a door when he did not think he could. That is my answer, Nathaniel. That is the answer after the 20th. He closed his eyes. He did not kiss her on the courthouse steps. Nathaniel Reed was not a man for a kiss on a courthouse step. He only took her hand and laid it in the crook of his arm, and they walked down the stone steps together, and Judge Samuel Whitfield, who had followed them out, and was standing a little way off with his hat in his hands, waiting to be told whether his daughter would permit him to walk with them, was permitted by a small movement of Eleanor's head to fall into step at her other side. 3 of them went down the steps together. Not 2. That Eleanor thought afterward was the true end of it. Not the kiss in the sitting room at 1 o'clock in the morning. Not the vow in her father's parlor. Not the letter in Mrs. Boone's apron pocket. The end of it was the 3 of them on the stone steps at Richmond in the autumn sun, walking at the same pace, because an injustice had been spoken against her in open court, and the 2 men who had between them made the greatest part of her life had stood up in the same room on the same afternoon and refused it. At Reed House in the weeks after the East Wing sitting room became a morning room, Mrs. Boone moved Annie's Bible to the Reed family shelf in the library, where it sat between a Book of Common Prayer and a Virginia almanac, and was read on Sundays by whichever member of the household wished to. The shawl went into the cedar chest at the foot of Nathaniel's bed. The violin came out, and was tuned, and was played badly, as Nathaniel had always played it in the front parlor, with the door open on winter evenings. And on an evening in late November, with the first hard frost on the Virginia fields and a fire in the grate, Eleanor Reed sat in the chair that had once been Anne's in the room that had once been locked with a book open on her knee, and her husband at the other side of the hearth with a ledger on his, and she looked up and she said, "Nathaniel." "Yes, Eleanor." "I have been thinking." "That is generally trouble, Mrs. Reed." "It is. I have been thinking, sir, that we were not saved by this marriage, either of us. You were not saved by me. I was not saved by you. We were not rescued, Nathaniel. We were only at last chosen. By ourselves. By each other. Late. In the wrong order. Out of a bargain neither of us would have signed if we had been asked. But chosen Mr. Reed at last. And I find, sir, that I did not come into this world to be saved. I came into it to be seen. And you have seen me, Nathaniel. And that is the only thing a husband was ever meant to do for a wife. And it is enough." He looked at her across the fire. He did not answer for a long moment. "Eleanor." "Yes, Nathaniel." It is enough." And outside in the Virginia night, the wind picked up across the fields, and the house, which had stood 3 years and 7 months, in a silence so deep that its own servants had learned to whisper in the halls, did not that night make a single silent room. The frost held through December and into January, and in the third week of January, Eleanor Reed could not keep down her breakfast. She did not tell Nathaniel. She told herself at first that it was the winter fare. The cook had been heavy on the pork fat since the hogs were killed before Christmas, and Eleanor had never had a stomach for pork fat, even in a good year. She told herself the second week that it was nerves. She told herself the third week that it was the chicory. Mrs. Boone kept steeping too strong because the good coffee had not come up from the port since November. On a Tuesday, in the last week of January, Mrs. Abigail Boone came into Eleanor's sitting room without knocking, closed the door behind her, and said, "Ma'am?" "Mrs. Boone." "Ma'am, I have lived in this house since I was 19 years old." Mrs. Boone. "Ma'am, let me. I have lived in this house since I was 19, and I buried one mistress out of it, and I have watched another one come in, and I am not, ma'am, as old as I look, but I am old enough to know what I know. And I know what I have been watching in this sitting room for 3 weeks. Eleanor set down her pen. "Mrs. Boone?" "Ma'am." "Sit down." Mrs. Boone sat. "How long have you known?" 12 days, ma'am. Perhaps 13. I did not like to speak until I was certain, and I did not like to speak even then because I knew what it would do to you, ma'am, to hear me say it out loud. But you are past keeping it, Mrs. Reed. You will not keep it past Sunday. Not in this house, not from Mr. Reed. He has been watching you at supper, ma'am. He has not eaten his own plate in 4 nights. He thinks you are sick. He has not said a word to me, ma'am. He does not know he is looking at it, but he is looking." Eleanor put both hands flat on her writing desk. "Abigail." "Ma'am?" "Abigail, I cannot tell him." Mrs. Reed. "I cannot tell him. Do you understand me? I cannot tell him." "Ma'am, he must be told. I know he must be told. I did not say he must not. I said I cannot. There is a difference. Mrs. Boone and you of all women in this house know the difference. If I tell that man today that I am carrying his child Abigail, he will go back into the south barn, and he will not come out, and we shall none of us see him again until the spring. He will not survive being told. Not yet. Not in January. Not when it is too cold to write it off." Mrs. Reed. "Abigail, she died. I know she died, ma'am. She died, and he has not slept a full night in 3 years and 7 months, because of how she died. And I will not hand him a second one on a Tuesday morning in his own study, and watch him learn how to be afraid again. He has only just learned how not to be. I will not take it from him in one sentence. Ma'am, he will be more afraid if he finds out by watching." Eleanor closed her eyes. "Yes." "Yes, Mrs. Reed?" "I know Abigail." "When?" "Saturday." "Ma'am?" "Saturday, Mrs. Boone. Give me to Saturday. I will tell him on Saturday evening after supper in the parlor with the fire low, and I will tell him properly, and I will tell him in such a way that he has his wife's 2 eyes on him when he hears it, and not the memory of another woman's. Give me to Saturday." "Saturday, ma'am?" "Saturday. And Abigail." "Ma'am, do not look at me at supper." "No, Mrs. Reed. I shall be carrying the soup with my eyes on the floor." He found out on Thursday. He did not find out from Mrs. Boone. Mrs. Boone, to her last breath in Reed House, kept her promise. He found out because Caleb Turner's wife Martha came up to the house on Thursday morning with a basket of winter greens and a small crock of ginger preserves, and she set the crock down on the kitchen table, and she said in the doorway, where the cook was kneading and the cook's girl was skimming broth, "Tell Mrs. Reed I thought of her. The ginger helped me through my first 3. She has a look about her I remember." The cook froze. The cook's girl froze. Martha Turner, halfway out the door, realized and turned back and said, "Oh, Lord." "Mrs. Turner," the cook began, "Mrs. Reed has not—" "I know she has not, Mrs. Coombs. I did not mean to. I did not know it was not said. I am sorry. Do not tell her I said a word. Do not tell a soul I was here." And she went. And at the back of the kitchen, with a sheaf of accounts in his hand and his boots still on from the south barn, Nathaniel Reed stood, very quietly. Because Nathaniel Reed had come in through the kitchen door 3 minutes earlier for a pair of shears he had left on the sideboard the night before, and none of them had seen him in the pantry doorway. He did not move. Mrs. Coombs saw him first. She made a small sound. He put one finger briefly to his lips, and she was quiet. He set the shears down on the sideboard very gently, and he walked back out the kitchen door without the shears, and without a word, and none of the 3 women in that kitchen drew breath until the outer latch had fallen behind him. "Oh, Mrs. Coombs," the cook's girl said. "Hush, child." "Oh, Mrs. Coombs, he heard it." "I said hush." "Should I go and find Mrs. Boone?" "You shall not. You shall go and skim that broth, and you shall not say one word of what happened in this kitchen to any soul under this roof, or I shall take a wooden spoon to the back of your hand. Go." Upstairs, Eleanor was writing a letter to her mother. She did not know at 10:30 that her husband had walked out of his own kitchen and down across the side lawn and out to the old paddock fence at the edge of the south field, and that he was standing at that fence with his hat off and both hands flat on the top rail and his head bent, and that he had not moved in 12 minutes. Mrs. Boone found him at 11. "Sir?" "Mrs. Boone." "Sir, you have been out without your coat." Mrs. Boone. "Sir, let me—" "Mrs. Boone, how long have you known?" Mrs. Abigail Boone did not lie. 13 days, sir." "And she?" "She knows, sir. She was going to tell you on Saturday. She asked me, sir, for Saturday. She said she would tell you properly, and not hand it to you in a sentence, and I gave her my word, Mr. Reed, that I would carry the soup Thursday and Friday with my eyes on the floor." "Saturday?" "Yes, sir." "Mrs. Boone, do you know what I have been standing at this fence thinking for the last—" "Yes, Mr. Reed, I know what you have been standing there thinking." "Mrs. Boone?" "Sir, listen to me. Listen to me 1 minute and then you may go where you like. She is not Anne. Do you hear me, Mr. Reed? Your wife upstairs is not Anne Reed. She is not the woman you buried. She is not made of the same stuff. She is not afraid of the same things. She is 22 years old, and she has the shoulders of a woman who hauled a lead rope through a storm in August. And if you stand at this fence all afternoon, making her into a corpse in your head, sir, I will come back out here at dusk, and I will slap you. I have not slapped a Reed in 30 years of service, Mr. Reed, but I shall break my record this evening if you make me." Nathaniel did not answer. "Mr. Reed." "Mrs. Boone." "Go into her, sir. Now, not Saturday. Now, before she has to see in your face that you knew before she told you. She will not forgive it, Mr. Reed, if you let her tell you a thing you have spent 3 hours swallowing at a fence. Go now, sir. Do not take off your boots." He went. He came into her sitting room without knocking, and Eleanor looked up, and the pen went still in her hand, because she saw his face, and his face was the face she had seen in her father's garden in July, the face of a man who had been paying a long time for a thing no one had asked him to pay for, and she knew before he had spoken a word that someone had told him. Nathaniel. Eleanor. Who? Martha Turner. She did not know. She brought the cook ginger. It was not her fault. It was not Mrs. Boone. Mrs. Boone was going to keep Saturday for you. I overheard. I am sorry. Nathaniel, sit down. Eleanor. Sit, Nathaniel. He sat. He sat on the edge of the chair opposite her desk with his hat still in his hand, and Eleanor saw then that he had been at a fence somewhere without his coat, because his shirt was wet at the shoulders with the melted edge of a morning frost, and his fingers were red. "How long have you been outside?" "A while." "A while." "I do not know, Eleanor." Nathaniel. "Yes." "Look at me, please." He looked at her. "I am not Anne." Eleanor. "I am not Anne, sir. I have not been Anne for any day of this marriage, and I will not be Anne for this. Do you hear me? I am 22 years old. I have ridden since I was 6. I hauled your lead colt through a thunderstorm in August. I have been unwell for 3 weeks in the mornings, and I have been perfectly well in the afternoons, and Dr. Haddon rode over on Monday from Ashland at my request, and was in this house an hour and a half, and he told me, Nathaniel, in plain words, that I am in good health, and that I shall be in good health, and that there is nothing in his examination of me that gives him any cause to fear for either of us. Do you hear me? You saw Haddon. I saw Haddon on Monday, privately, in Mrs. Boone's parlor. You were at the mill. Without telling me. Without telling you, Nathaniel. Eleanor. I am not finished, sir. Eleanor. I am not finished. I did not tell you on Monday, Nathaniel, because I am not an idiot. I am your wife. I have known you 6 months. I have known for 6 months that the word childbed is a word you cannot hear spoken in this house without going to the south barn. I was not going to walk into your study at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning and hand you that word across your own desk without having first sat in a parlor with a doctor and heard that I am not in danger. I went to Haddon first, deliberately, on purpose, so that when I came to you, sir, I would come to you with news, not with a question. So that I could tell you, Nathaniel, that your wife is well, and that your child, if God permits, will be born in the late summer, and that I do not, Nathaniel, intend to die, and that no woman in Virginia has ever yet died because her husband stood at a fence in January with his hat off. Do you hear me? Nathaniel Reed put his face in his hands. He did not weep in front of her. He did not quite. He only sat for a long minute with his face in his hands, and he breathed, and Eleanor saw his shoulders twice, and she did not go to him because she had said a thing that had to sit on the floor between them for 1 whole minute before she touched him. Then she went to him. She crossed the small space between her desk and his chair, and she knelt in her winter dress on her own floor, and she took both of his hands down from his face and held them in her own. Nathaniel? Eleanor. Say it. Say what? Say the thing you have been saying to yourself since Martha Turner opened her mouth at the kitchen door. Say it out loud to me, sir. Do not carry it to the fence again. Eleanor, I cannot lose you. I know you cannot. I cannot, Eleanor. Do you understand me? I cannot. I have been a widower once in this life. I will not be a widower twice. I will ride into the river first. I will. Do not look at me that way. I will. I have thought it. I have thought it since 11 o'clock at the fence. I have thought it. Eleanor, and I will tell you I have thought it, because you asked me once in this sitting room not to lie to you, and I am not going to begin now. If you die in August, Eleanor Reed, I am not going to walk back into this house. Eleanor's hands went still in his. Nathaniel. I know I should not say it. Nathaniel Reed. I know Eleanor. Listen to me, sir. Yes, if I die in August, which I shall not. But if I did, Nathaniel, and you rode into the river on the afternoon of my burial, sir, I should rise up out of my grave at Reed churchyard, and I should walk across the lower pasture in my shroud, and I should come up to the river bank. Nathaniel Reed, and I should pull you out of that water myself, and I should ask you, sir, in front of every angel and every witness, what possible use you thought it was to a dead wife to have a dead husband. He made a sound. It was half a laugh. It was half something else. Eleanor. I am not joking, Mr. Reed. No, Mrs. Reed, I am not. Do you hear me? A child of mine, Nathaniel, will not come into this world with one grieving parent at its cradle and one drowned one in the churchyard. A child of mine, sir, will come into this world with 2 parents at its cradle, if God permits both of us to be there, and with 1 parent if he does not. And that 1 parent, Nathaniel, whichever of us it is, will stand at that cradle upright. Do you swear that to me? Eleanor. Do you swear it, Mr. Reed? I do not know if I can, Eleanor. Then swear, Nathaniel, that you will try. Swear that the day my child is born, sir, you will not be in the south barn. You will not be at a fence with your hat off. You will not be at the river bank. You will be in this house, in this hall, on your feet, with a door between you and me, because that is the way of the world, but with your boots on, and your coat on, and your hand on that door ready to walk through it when it is opened from the inside. Swear that to me, Nathaniel Reed. He did not answer for a long time. Nathaniel. I swear it, Eleanor. Again. I swear it. Once more. I swear it, Eleanor. On my 2 hands. On hers, if you will permit it. I swear it. I will not be in the south barn. I will be in the hall. I will have my boots on. I will have my coat on. I will have my hand on the door. I swear it." "Good." She put her forehead briefly against his knee. He put his hand not on her hair. Nathaniel Reed had never yet permitted himself to touch her hair, but at the back of her neck lightly, the way a man touches a thing he has been afraid to trust to his own hand. "Eleanor." "Yes." "I am afraid." "I know, Nathaniel." "I am afraid as I have not been afraid since I was 9 years old." "I know." "Eleanor." "Yes." "I do not know how to do this." "No, Nathaniel, neither do I. We shall have to learn it together, as we have learned everything else in this house." She rose at last, and she went back to her chair, because her knees were not in truth as patient as her spirit, and because she had learned in 6 months at Reed House that Nathaniel Reed required a small distance at the exact moment he was most grateful for closeness, and she was not going to unmake his week by refusing him the distance. "Mr. Reed." "Mrs. Reed." "Saturday." "Ma'am?" "I should like Saturday anyway. Not to tell you, you already know, but to sit in the parlor with a low fire and tell Mrs. Boone and the cook and the girl and Caleb Turner and Martha, who has, I understand, already guessed, and to tell them properly. As a household. Because this child Nathaniel will be born into a house not a secret, and this house will not again keep a thing from itself, will it? No, Mrs. Reed, it will not. Then Saturday. Saturday. And Nathaniel. Yes. You will write this afternoon to Dr. Haddon. I will write to Haddon. And you will not in the next 7 months use the word confinement in my presence. I will not use the word Eleanor. Because the word is not mine, it was hers. And she had the right to it. And I have my own word, Nathaniel, which I have not yet chosen, and I shall choose it, and when I have chosen it, I shall tell you what it is, and you shall use it. Yes, Mrs. Reed. Good. He stood. He did not go to the door at once. Eleanor. Yes, sir. Thank you. For what, Nathaniel? For going to Haddon first. Of course I went to Haddon first. I married a man who lost a wife. I am not a cruel woman, Mr. Reed. I am only a plain one. You are not plain, Eleanor. Go and put on a dry shirt, Nathaniel. You are dripping on my floor. And send Mrs. Boone up to me if you pass her. I have a Saturday to plan. He went to the door. He stopped. Eleanor. Yes, in August. In August, sir. I will be in the hall. I know you will, Nathaniel. With my boots on. Yes, Nathaniel. And my coat on. Yes. And my hand on the door. Yes, Nathaniel. Eleanor. Yes, sir. I love you. I know, Nathaniel. Go and put on a dry shirt. He went. Eleanor sat at her writing desk for a long time after he had gone, and she did not pick up her pen at once, and she did not weep, and she did not, for the first time in 3 weeks, reach for the tin of ginger Mrs. Boone had left for her on the windowsill. She only laid her hand very lightly across the flat of her own winter dress, at the place where in 7 months there would be a child, and she said quietly into the empty sitting room, "You will have 2 of us, child. I swear it. Whatever happens, you will have 2. And outside, across the south field, a man in a wet shirt came down from the fence at last and went into his own house, not to the barn, and did not come out again until supper. He did not go to the barn that night. He did not go to the barn for any night of the 7 months that followed. And Mrs. Abigail Boone, who had watched a master of Reed House flee his own hall for 3 years and 7 months, took quiet note each evening when the kitchen door did not open after 10. And she said nothing of it to anyone, because Mrs. Boone had learned in a long life of service that some changes in a house are best left unremarked upon until they have set. Saturday came. The household was told in the front parlor with a low fire. Mrs. Coombs wept into her apron. The cook's girl, whose name was Patience, forgot for a moment that she had been a servant of the second Mrs. Reed for only 4 months, and came forward and took Eleanor's hand in both of hers, and Eleanor did not correct her. Caleb Turner took off his hat and held it against his chest and said quietly, "Ma'am, sir, I shall speak to the boys in the morning. There will not be a harsh word on this place from this evening forward. You have my word on it." Martha Turner, who had come up with her husband, sat on the settee next to Eleanor, and did not speak at all, because Martha had already said what she had to say on a Thursday morning at the kitchen door, and she had the sense to know it. Mrs. Boone stood at the mantel. She did not weep. Mrs. Boone had used her weeping. She only said at the end, when the household had filed out and the fire had burned lower, "Ma'am, sir, I have a thing to say." "Say it, Abigail," Eleanor said. "I shall serve this child, ma'am, the way I served every Reed I was ever set to. And I will tell you, Mrs. Reed, that I have a pair of hands that have brought more babies into Virginia than most midwives in this county. And when the time comes, ma'am, I should like to be in the room." Nathaniel went white. Mrs. Boone. "Sir." "Mrs. Boone, I will not ask that of you. Not after." "You are not asking it, Mr. Reed. I am offering it. Anne's was not the first, sir. Anne's was not the last. I have been in that room before and since, and I have seen more come out of it living than not. And Mrs. Reed here is young, and Mrs. Reed here is strong, and Mrs. Reed here is a Whitfield, sir, and those women have hip bones like the Appalachian Mountains, ma'am. I beg your pardon for the plainness." Eleanor laughed. It was the first laugh of that Saturday, and it broke something in the room that had been holding tight all evening. "Abigail." "Ma'am." "You will be in the room." "Thank you, Mrs. Reed." "Thank you, Abigail." Spring came up the river slowly. The dogwood went out first and the apple after, and by the middle of April, Eleanor Reed was no longer able to ride, and she did not pretend that she was. She walked the tenant line instead, on her husband's arm, one farm at a time, one morning at a time, and she sat in tenant kitchens in a plain dark dress with her ankles crossed under her, and she heard every complaint and every small piece of good news and every rumor there was to hear in the lower 3 miles of the Reed holding, because Eleanor Reed had learned in 9 months of marriage that a mistress who sat in a tenant kitchen was a mistress. No man in Virginia could slander twice. Jasper Caldwell did try twice. He tried in March through a second cousin in Fredericksburg with a letter to a Richmond paper insinuating that the recent pregnancy at Reed House was of a haste that permits questions any honest household would answer. Judge Samuel Whitfield, now 71 and tired. And finally, Eleanor, thought gentled by his own shame, wrote a letter of his own in reply, and that letter went into the same Richmond paper within the week, and it said, among other things, that any man who inquired after the dates in the cradle of his only grandchild was welcome to inquire after them upon his own doorstep, provided he came with 2 witnesses and a physician, because Judge Whitfield did not intend to repeat himself on the matter, and did not intend to be misunderstood. No one came to the doorstep. Jasper Caldwell did not write a third letter. By the end of May, he had sold his interest in a Richmond counting house and removed to Baltimore, and Eleanor read the notice aloud at breakfast, and Nathaniel Reed, for the second time in his life, in her presence, laughed. "Mrs. Reed." "Mr. Reed." "You have chased a man out of Virginia." "I have done no such thing, Nathaniel Reed." "You have Eleanor. He has gone to Baltimore. He has gone to Baltimore because he has exhausted the goodwill of a state that will not be lied to about one of its own daughters, sir. I had very little to do with it." Mrs. Reed. "Yes. You are becoming dangerous. I am becoming a mother, Nathaniel. There is very little difference." Summer came on hard. By the last week of July, 1 year almost to the day from the morning Eleanor Whitfield had slammed her riding crop on her father's desk, she was no longer coming downstairs. Dr. Haddon had taken rooms at Reed House since the 15th. He was a short, dry, careful man, 60 years old, who had delivered 400 babies in Virginia and had buried 41 mothers in the doing, and he did not tell Nathaniel Reed that last number, because Dr. Haddon was also kind. He told Nathaniel instead over a glass of brandy in the study on the evening of the 17th. "Mr. Reed, your wife is well. Your wife's pulse is good. Your wife's color is good. Your wife, sir, has the carriage of a woman who will not require my skill so much as my patience. Drink your brandy, sir, and do not ask me again this week whether I am worried. I am not. I shall tell you when I am." Nathaniel drank his brandy. He did not ask again that week. He did not ask again the week after. On the evening of the 28th of July, Eleanor Reed was taken with her first pains a little after 7 in the evening, and by 9 o'clock, Mrs. Boone had shut the door of the East Wing bedroom, and by 9:15, Nathaniel Reed was standing in the upstairs hall in his coat and his boots with his hand on the frame of the door. He stood there all night. He stood through the 10 o'clock bell. He stood through the 11. He stood at midnight, while Mrs. Coombs came up the back stairs with a pot of coffee he did not drink, and he stood at 2, while Caleb Turner came up the main stairs and did not speak, because there was nothing a man could say to another man standing where Nathaniel Reed was standing, and Caleb Turner had the sense to know it, and only gripped his master's shoulder once and went back down. At 3, Eleanor Reed screamed. It was a long scream. It was the scream of a woman doing hard work. Nathaniel Reed did not move from the door. At 4, she screamed again, and at 4, Mrs. Boone opened the door 3 inches and said, "She is doing well, Mr. Reed. She is working. Haddon is pleased. Go and drink your coffee, sir, and come back. I will call you if I have cause." "Mrs. Boone?" "Sir, I will not leave the door." "Sir, the coffee is on the landing." "I will not leave the door, Mrs. Boone. I swore." Mrs. Boone looked at him, and Mrs. Boone nodded, and Mrs. Boone closed the door. At 5 minutes past 5 in the morning of the 29th of July, 1818, 1 year, to the hour, since Eleanor Whitfield had sat in her father's study and heard herself sold, the first small furious cry came out of the East Wing bedroom of Reed House. Nathaniel Reed put his forehead against the door. He did not weep. He only stood with his forehead on the wood until Mrs. Abigail Boone opened the door from the inside, and she had her sleeves rolled up, and there was blood on her apron, and her face was wet, and she was smiling. Mrs. Boone was smiling for the first time in 3 years and 8 months, and she said, "Sir, you have a daughter." Eleanor. "She is well, Mr. Reed. She is tired. She is asking for you. Come in, sir. Come in." He went in. Eleanor Reed was in the big bed with a small, red, furious child against her shoulder, and she was paler than he had ever seen her, and her hair was wet at the temples, and she looked up at him, and she smiled, and she said, "Nathaniel." Eleanor. "I told you." Eleanor. "I told you, Mr. Reed. I told you not to be in the south barn. Come here." He came. He sat at the edge of the bed as if he did not trust it to hold him, and Eleanor shifted the small bundle off her shoulder and into the crook of her own elbow, and she said, "Your daughter, Mr. Reed, Anne." He looked at her. "Eleanor." "I chose her, Nathaniel." "Eleanor, you do not have to—" "I chose her, sir. I did not tell you. I did not wish to be talked out of it, and I know you would have tried. Not Anne Reed. She will never be Anne Reed. She will be Anne Whitfield Reed, and she will be her own person, and she will carry a name that belonged to a woman who asked her husband in a letter to let a child walk in her rooms one day. There is a child in her rooms now, Nathaniel. I chose it. Do not argue with me. I am tired." He did not argue. He put his hand very carefully on the back of his daughter's head, on the small, damp, dark hair of her, on the warmth of her, and he bent, and he put his mouth against his wife's forehead, and he stayed there a long time, and he did not speak, because there were not in Virginia the words. At last he said, "Eleanor." "Yes, Nathaniel." "I was in the hall." "I know, sir." "With my boots on." "I know, Nathaniel." "And my coat on." "I know." "And my hand on the door." "I know, sir. Mrs. Boone told me through it. I heard you breathe once. I knew. Go to sleep, Nathaniel. You have not slept." "Eleanor, you have not slept." "No, sir. I have been otherwise occupied." He laughed the third laugh in her company in 12 months, and he did not leave her side until full daylight. Mrs. Abigail Boone, on the landing outside, sat down on the top step of the staircase in her bloody apron at 5:30 in the morning, and she did the thing she had not done in public in 11 years of service. She bowed her head in her hands, and she wept, not for grief, for the opposite of grief, for the thing there is no English word for. The christening was in September in the parish church, where Anne Reed was buried, with a plain gold ring on the child's small white shawl that had been Eleanor's grandmother's, and with Judge Samuel Whitfield standing up as godfather, and with Mrs. Abigail Boone standing at the back pew beside Caleb Turner and Martha. and with the Reverend Halloway's voice shaking slightly at the name Anne Whitfield Reed, because the Reverend Halloway was a man who remembered, and who kept his remembering in the collar of his coat. Nathaniel Reed at the font, holding his daughter, looked once across the nave at the small stone that had been there 3 years and 8 months now, and he did not weep. He had in the last year put down his weeping where it belonged in a cedar chest at the foot of his own bed, and he did not pick it up again at a font. He only bowed his head very slightly toward the stone. And anyone in that parish who had known Nathaniel Reed in the year of 1814, and who had known him in the year of 1817, and who sat in a pew and watched him incline his head toward his first wife's grave, over the body of his second wife's child, anyone like that would have understood, if they were asked, that the Beast of Virginia was not any longer in that church. Only a man, only a husband, only a father. Eleanor in the front pew, in a dark blue dress she had sewn herself, because the second Mrs. Reed in the last 8 months had surprised the county by sewing, watched her husband take their daughter back to the pew, and she thought, "We did not deserve any of this, Nathaniel. Not the worst of it, not the best of it. None of it was deserved. We only lived it." And she reached out when he sat down, and she took his hand in front of the entire parish, and she did not let it go. That autumn, Eleanor Reed opened Anne's former sitting room as the family morning room. The shutters came off in October. The curtains came down. Mrs. Coombs sent up a vase of the last chrysanthemums from the kitchen garden, and they were put on the small table by the window, and the cook's girl Patience came up on a Tuesday to dust, and found Mrs. Reed with the baby on her knee, reading aloud from a Virginia almanac, and she went down and told Mrs. Boone, and Mrs. Boone sat down at the kitchen table with her chicory, and said, "Thanks be." Caleb Turner's wages were raised twice. The 2 new housemaids who had been hired in February stayed. Thomas Hale wrote to Eleanor in November a short, careful, decent letter, wishing her joy of her child, and congratulating her upon her family, and he did not try to say anything more than that, and Eleanor, reading it in her morning room with her daughter asleep on the rug beside her, thought he had become at last the man she had once hoped to meet at 19. She answered him kindly in 3 lines, and she did not write again, and neither did he. That she thought was the clean close of a door she had left on its hinges for 7 years. Some doors did not need to be slammed. Some only needed to be set quietly into their frames and latched. On a cold evening in the middle of December, a year and a half after a storm had come through a paddock in August, and 2 people who did not know each other had hauled a lead colt through a gate. In the dark, Nathaniel Reed came into his wife's morning room and sat on the hearthrug with his daughter on his knee. He was teaching her with very limited success the difference between a wooden spoon and his own thumb. Eleanor was at the small desk by the window, going through the year's final tenant accounts, and she was humming softly under her breath, because she had discovered over that autumn that she was a woman who hummed. "Mr. Reed. Mrs. Reed. I wish to say a thing to you." "Say it, Eleanor." She closed the ledger. "Nathaniel." "Yes." "In my father's study, on the 29th of July, 2 summers ago, my father told me that in Virginia, a woman without fortune and without obedience had no power." "I remember you telling me, Eleanor." "I did not believe him then, sir, because I was 22, and I was furious, and I did not have the evidence. I have the evidence now." "Have you Mrs. Reed?" "I have Mr. Reed, and I will tell you what it is." "Tell me." "My father was wrong." Nathaniel did not answer. "He was wrong, Nathaniel, not because women in Virginia have fortune. Most of us do not. Not because women in Virginia have obedience. I, for one, did not. He was wrong because he used the word power, sir, as if it were a thing a person was given. And I have learned in 18 months in your house that power is not a thing a person is given. It is a thing a person takes back. An hour at a time, a ledger at a time, a door at a time, a servant's wage at a time, a lie refused at a time. I took mine back, Nathaniel Reed, not because you let me. You did, sir, and I thank you for it, but I would have taken it back anyway, and you know it. I took mine back because I decided to. That is the only way any woman in this country has ever taken hers back, and it will be the only way any woman in this country ever does. Eleanor. I am not finished, Mr. Reed. No, ma'am. Our daughter Nathaniel. Yes. Our daughter will not be sold. No, Mrs. Reed. She will not be told in her father's study that a settlement of marriage has been drawn. She will not come back from her ride on a summer morning and find a wedding silk ordered from Richmond. She will not Nathaniel Reed be given away. Do you hear me, sir? I hear you, Eleanor. She will marry if she marries because she chose, or she will not marry if she does not, and she will inherit the Reed land, sir, in her own name by deed of gift at her majority, whether she marries or not. You will sign the papers in the spring. I have spoken to Hale. He will draw them. Your cousin in Maryland will not like it. I do not care. I do not care either, Eleanor. I thought you would not, sir. Anne Whitfield Reed. Nathaniel Reed said to the small, warm pulling weight on his knee, Do you hear what your mother has just done to your grandfather in Maryland? You have a very dangerous mother, Annie. You are going to have to learn to be worthy of her. It will take you some years. I have been working at it since July of 17. Eleanor Reed laughed. She laughed the way a woman laughs who has come up out of a bargain. She did not sign into a life she did, and she crossed the small morning room, and she sat down on the hearthrug beside her husband in her good wool dress, on her own floor, in her own house, under her own roof. And she took her daughter's small hand between her own thumb and forefinger. Annie, she said, your mother was sold to your father in July of 1817 for $11,400, which was a great deal of money and an insult to both of us. And you will hear the story in full when you are older, because in this house, child, we do not hide a thing. But I will tell you the end of it now, so that you have the end of it before you have the beginning, which is the way I wish someone had told it to me. The end of it, Mrs. Reed. The end of it, Mr. Reed. Tell it, Eleanor. Your mother. Eleanor Reed said very quietly to her daughter, was not saved by her husband. She was not saved by her father. She was not saved by her mother, and she was not saved by the county, and she was not saved by the grace of God, though the grace of God had a hand in it at several turns, as the grace of God will. Your mother saved herself, Annie. And on the day she saved herself, she looked up, and she found that a good man had been standing at the door of her room with his boots on, and his coat on, and his hand on the wood, waiting to be asked in. And she asked him in. And that, child, is how a house gets built, not by rescue, by recognition. Your father recognized your mother Annie in her father's garden on a morning in July, and your mother recognized your father a year later in the east hall of this house, with a faded black ribbon between them. That is all. That is the whole of it, and there has not been a morning since, child, that either of them has regretted it. Eleanor. Yes, Nathaniel. Say the last thing. What last thing? Say the last thing, Eleanor, the one you have been saying to yourself since the christening. She looked at him across their daughter. I am not afraid any more, Nathaniel. No, Eleanor. I was afraid in my father's study. I was afraid in my father's garden. I was afraid on the carriage ride into this yard. I was afraid in that east wing bed the first night I was in it. I was afraid, Nathaniel, when Martha Turner spoke at the kitchen door. I was afraid in January. I was afraid in July. I am not afraid any more, Mr. Reed. That is the last thing. That is the whole thing. I have spent 23 years of my life afraid of one man or another, and I am not afraid of you, and I am not afraid of my father, and I am not afraid of Jasper Caldwell in Baltimore, and I am not afraid of Reverend Halloway's pulpit, and I am not afraid of the county, and I am not afraid, Nathaniel, of this house. That is the end of a woman's story, when she is not afraid of the room she is sitting in. Eleanor. Say it back to me, sir. I am not afraid either, Eleanor. Good. She kissed her daughter once on the crown of her dark hair. She kissed her husband once on the side of his mouth. And Eleanor Whitfield Reed, on the hearthrug of the morning room of the house she had been sold to on the last Saturday of July of 1817, set her back against her husband's shoulder, and she said quietly, for the record of no one but herself, I was not saved, I was seen, and there is no power on this earth, Nathaniel Reed, that will ever sell me again. She was never sold again, not in any summer, Not in any winter. Not by any man. And the beast of Virginia, who had paid $11,400 for a judge's daughter so that he would not have to open a door in his own house, lived 41 more years in that house with the woman he had been permitted to recognize. And he died in her arms in the spring of 1859, in the East Wing bedroom, with his hand on hers, and his daughter at the foot of the bed, and the last word he spoke on this earth was her name.